Hello, this is Joyelle Brandt here from Parenting with PTSD. I am here today with Heather Tuba, and we are going to have a conversation about survival strategies for the holidays for people who are childhood abuse survivors. This time of year can be a particularly triggering time of year. For some people, it might involve seeing family members who were abusive to them in the past. It might involve memories coming up because a lot of people have a lot of memories surface around the holidays. And in addition to that, the holidays are just a stressful time for anybody, hands down. There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of pressure that we can put on ourselves. There's just a lot going on in our schedules and busy lives. Or sometimes you've got the obvious opposite of that, which is that everybody else around you looks like they're so busy and happy and got lots going on, and you are not. And how do you deal with that too? So we're going to talk about some of those issues that come up. First, I'm going to introduce you to Heather. So hi, Heather. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Joyelle. I'm sorry about that.
Everybody trips over it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. So I'm just going to tell people a little bit about you.
Okay.
So Heather is a certified trauma recovery coach, and she specializes in working with partners of survivors. Which is really great because we're going to be able to have a conversation today from the two different perspectives. I personally am a trauma survivor, and I work with trauma survivors, mostly moms. And Heather personally is a partner to a survivor, and her work is centered on working with partners and supporting them through that process. And I'll tell you a little bit about how she ended up doing this. So Heather is a regular person who found herself in a set of overwhelming circumstances when her husband of 20 years started to have visual flashbacks of a traumatic childhood. Unbeknownst to her spouse and herself, he had blocked and disassociated from key parts of his past. The subsequent fallout from these retrieved memories changed the course of their life. In addition to the overwhelm of her family's circumstances, Heather discovered the inadequacy of current medical health care systems in addressing her support needs as a partner. In 2016, she began to blog about the impact of childhood trauma on partners. In 2017, she founded the only online support group for partners of survivors with complex PTSD. She has also written 2 resource guides for partners available for download on her website, which is heathertuba.com. Heather believes in validating the experiences of partners and providing these important people the care they often need while living in conditions of chronic stress. To meet these needs, she provides one-on-one support for partners. She also offers educational consulting and speaking on how to better support partners. So this is a really important topic because when we're dealing with any kind of childhood abuse trauma, we're looking at family systems and how we support family systems. So I wanted Heather to share a story that really summed up one of the key issues that we're talking about today that she read in Brene Brown's new book. So can you tell us about that, Heather?
Sure. So this is a story from the new book, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And you can find it on page 46, 47. I'm just going to summarize it, but Brene and her husband, Steve, are getting ready for a party. It's one of those progressive dinner parties where you go from house to house and eat a course at each home. And they were in charge of the appetizer portion. And it was starting in 2 hours. And Brene says to Steve that she's very excited about this event, and she's excited because she's going to try all these new recipes. Now, remember, it's starting in 2 hours and they are doing the appetizers. So that would be the first stop. And then she said to her husband, why don't you do some paint touch-up in the dining room and add some pops of color in the front yard? In other words, do landscaping. And so her husband just stares at her, and then Brene glares at him and says, like, what's the problem? And he says back to her, well, it's I know what it is. Going to take me 15 minutes, Home Depot, get the right flowers, come back. And sorry, Brene says that, and Steve is just staring at her. And then he says to her, Brene, you're not good at estimating time, which is a theme throughout the book, actually. And then he says to her, and this was the kicker for me, was what's not going to work is that you didn't factor in the hour we're going to need for the fight that's going to break out when I say, quote, hell no, I'm not going to landscape the front yard 2 hours before company comes. And she really doesn't get it. But as he's telling her this, she's feeling criticized. And then she's just kind of stands there. And then he says to her, look, just go have a shower. Or sorry, go for a run, have a shower, maybe lie down for 10 minutes. And we're just going to use what's here. And so, you know, the point of it for me is that we can get really hyped up about having the perfect event and having the perfect food and the perfect house, when really maybe what we do need to do is maintain our exercise routine, you know, have a shower, clean up, keep it really simple, and then just open the door to our guests or drive over to our wherever we're going. So what I liked about that, it was like, let's just do care for self before we even get into doing anything else. And probably if you're doing care for self, the rest is just going to fall into place.
Absolutely. And taking that point of trying not to make everything look and feel perfect, because it won't, because life is imperfect. And I think there's this pressure at the holidays to make our families and our homes look like amazing, like nobody actually lives there, you know, like some kind of HGTV special where people have spent hours making everything look perfect. And that's not our lives. That's not our truth. And if people are coming over and our houses are messy and there's piles of laundry everywhere, that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. And I find a lot of survivors put a lot of pressure on themselves to try to make, especially the holidays, perfect for their kids, because they're trying to, you know, we try to subconsciously make up for the things that happened to us as children. And we're trying to sort of give ourselves a redo, right, on a traumatic situation. But the truth is our kids would rather have us be there and be present and happy than be killing ourselves and making ourselves miserable. And it's okay to do less. It's really okay to do less. I'm cooking lasagna for Christmas dinner this year because it's so much easier because I can prep it the day before, and then Christmas Day I can enjoy time with my family. So if there are small things that you can do around this time of year to make your life and your family's life less stressful, then start with that. And Heather has a few more points to move on to about other suggestions that we can do to make our lives a little bit easier this time of year. So what have you got there, Heather?
Sure. If I could just share one thing on segueing off the lasagna. 2 years ago, my husband was not, like, he's really struggled for the last 7 years since these memories surfaced. And we've gone through some very, very challenging times. So 2 years ago, I just said, like, no Christmas dinner. Mm-hmm. And we ordered Chinese.
Yeah.
That was the year we also didn't do a Christmas tree. And so that was hard for my kids, but at the same time, once they kind of got over the fuss about it, it was fine. And it was a decision made to help us cope with overwhelming circumstances that we were in.
Right.
So it's okay to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joyelle asked me to come up with sort of 3 survival strategies. And I think these are appropriate whether you're a survivor or a partner supporting a survivor and navigating the holidays. So the first one I really believe in is I call it shore up support. So make sure, and this is something that needs to be in place all year long, but even more so at the holidays, make sure that you've got your support system in place. And sometimes people go on their own holidays and then we maybe don't have that friend support around. But I think it's important that we have some alternatives support as well. And Joyelle, I know that's where your support group can come in, and so can mine. Even just going into one of these groups and reading through the posts I know a lot of people find that really helpful. Making sure that there's good communication between you and your partner. Just making sure that you have some support in place, I think is really important. And then having really regular contact with that. And if you need more, being courageous enough to say, look, could I text you if I'm at a family event and I'm struggling? You can go in the bathroom and do that. So just kind of be creative, but be proactive about it.
And I think that's the big point, is be proactive about it. You don't want to wait until you're in a moment of crisis and you're thinking, because when you're in a moment of crisis, your brain is not functioning properly, right? The amygdala is taken over, prefrontal cortex is shut down. So you need to know in advance, what is my strategy going to be here? So you could have a list of people that you've made up in advance, 2 or 3 people that you can reach out to when you're struggling. You can also have strategies in place that you've talked over with your partner if you need to get out of a circumstance. So how are we going to deal with that? What are we going to say? What's our exit strategy going to be? You need to have these plans in place so that in the moment, you're not trying to come up with something and when you're already under stress and not able to think properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, and then my second point for a survival strategy, and this is just sort of across the board. It doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily for an event, but just sort of a seasonal survival strategy is to, our schedules are often thrown off because we've got like our kids' holiday concerts, or we've got like a work thing, and then we've got extra shopping or, extra stuff. So our schedules get thrown off, which means our regular routine of care for self is often thrown off too. So I do this a lot actually, and I call it micro self-care. And basically an example would be, say I'm in the kitchen prepping food. I intentionally pause to look out the window. And I'll find something that's beautiful out there, something that just really catches my eye, and I'll stop for 20, 30 seconds and just really absorb that experience. So it's bringing my attention back to the moment. You can do that with music. You can do that with textures, like if you're making something or you're hanging something on a tree, for example. A holiday tree is a great example because there's often beautiful ornaments on it, or they bring back good memories. So focusing and absorbing those types of experiences is really good. Go for a quick walk if you can. I like to take photos, so it's so easy to do that with our cameras. Really just anything where you pause for a moment to draw your attention back to the moment. You pause and you breathe it in and you absorb it. So that's what I call micro self-care. And I think that can be very grounding and regulating at this time of year.
Absolutely. And I often suggest to the coaching clients that I work with to make a 5x5 list, which is 5 things you can do in 5 minutes or less to help self-soothe. So things like that are perfect. Anything that requires your senses, right? Anything that requires you to just look deeply or smell something or sit with a hot cup of tea and have that physical sensation of it in your hands, or go for a short walk. Something that is soothing to you personally and helps to bring you down and from your higher stress levels and ground you in the moment. Dancing is a great one. Throw on a song that you really love and just have a little dance party with your kids in the kitchen. It helps, especially if you're really sort of spun out, like really feeling a lot of like too much energy inside of your body, to help bring you back down. So again, preparing in advance is really key here. Having a list that you could stick up on your fridge of, you've got, what we said earlier, you've got a couple people you can call if you're in crisis, and then you've got your 5x5 list up on the fridge. That is something that in the moment you can glance at and remind yourself, oh, here's a technique that I can use right now.
Yeah, and I think that's just as relevant for partners too, because we also get, we're reaching our tipping point too often, and we're often concerned about what's happening with our survivor partner. Mm-hmm. So we're, in addition to navigating the environment of holiday stress, we're also concerned about what's happening with our partner. And if we're at an event or we've got guests or whatever, we're concerned about the guests. So we as partners are juggling many, many things in the environment. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why, I started to implement that practice into my life, because it just helps to kind of push that stuff to the periphery for a few minutes, kind of resources me, and then I can come back into it. So, for partners, if you are not, you haven't practiced this, I mean, that's a great idea to have your own card.
Yes.
Ahead of time, and to have your own list. I've been doing some of this for a while, so I don't necessarily need a list. But if you're just starting out, or that you're like, I want to try this season and see how it works, I'm going to experiment, then for sure have a list.
Absolutely. All right, and you've got another point there for us.
Yeah, I think this is important because it's really under discussed, although everybody knows about it. It's for those who are in a fairly common scenario where it is just not safe to see certain people, or to attend certain events, or to go certain places. And because, as you mentioned, the pressure at the holidays of family, of activity, of closeness, and all the things that are there, but not necessarily reality, but they are there. I think it's important to validate and acknowledge that this is the reality for many people, that they just simply cannot go, they cannot be with certain people or be at certain places, because it just simply is not emotionally, psychologically, mentally safe. And I think I want to normalize that, first of all. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it's so because we've dealt with this, my partner and I have dealt with this. It's really important to talk about it. It's really important to figure this out. And I mean, that's beyond the scope of this discussion for sure, to walk that through. But, it is a reality. I've seen it with many partners. We've personally walked through some of those scenarios, and it's really hard. It feels like you're just going against the grain of the whole season when you actually don't do those things.
Yeah. There's a lot of very unfair pressure on survivors to suck it up and go be in the presence of their abusers for the sake of the family. And the pressure is put on the survivors as if they're setting those boundaries is going to result in destroying the family unit.
Yes.
And it is really hard to work against that pressure, which is very much part of the culture, and to say, I value my own psychological well-being more than anybody else's ego, who's might get hurt by me doing this. And it can cause a lot of strain and stress as you try to navigate through that. And I think that having that discussion with your partner in advance is really important, but can also be really hard, because I am surprised at the number of times since I started doing this work that people who I know very peripherally will end up coming up to me and disclosing their childhood abuse, which happened at the hands of a family member. They still have to see this person every year. They haven't even told their partner that this happened yet. Mm-hmm. So it's really stressful for everybody all around. And if you can have that open conversation with your partner in advance and explain to them what's going on, that you don't want to be around this person because this person was abusive towards you. This is going to re-trigger trauma for you. This is a situation that is really not talked about often enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. From my perspective, I think the majority of partners are certainly open to that discussion. And I want to be able to dispel some of that fear for survivors that and I can't make a 100% statement here, but in general, partners want to know what's going on. We want to have that information. We want to be able to support you in the way that you need. And it's hard for us when we don't know exactly what's going on. And so, I would encourage survivors to take small steps, and this can be a long-term project. Like, it's now 1 week till Christmas, so this isn't necessarily going to be applicable for this year, but it's going to give you something to think about, because there's lots of events during the year, right? There's birthdays, there's all these expectations. So I think, beginning to think about, maybe I need to have a deeper conversation with my partner. Maybe to consider that what I'm fearing could be, the outcome will not be what I fear. And so I would encourage survivors to consider that maybe the thing you're fearing isn't going to happen. Because I personally, in my interactions with partners, I don't see that at all.
Yeah, and that if your partner is not in a place to react positively to your disclosure, then that is not to do with you.
Exactly.
And I'd like to, we're getting close to the end here, but I'd like to add in, one of the things that Heather and I talked about early on is the challenges of going through the holidays when you are estranged from family because of abuse, and some of the things that can come up around that maybe are bubbling below the surface and we're not really feeling aware of. But say you're engaging in any kind of media, whether it's social media or movies or TV or whatever, around the holiday season, there are a lot of images of happy families, or Hollywood's favorite, the dysfunctional but truly loving family. And it can be extremely alienating and isolating and make you feel like you're the only one whose family is messed up when you hop on Facebook and everybody's posting all their lovely pictures of the perfect parts of their lives. And so one survival strategy that I suggest is, first of all, just disengage from social media. And I will personally be doing this. I'm going to be offline from December 21st to January 1st, because we need to take time to connect with ourselves and what's real for us in this moment and step away from that. And the other strategy, aside from disengaging with media, is just to remind yourself that nobody is posting pictures of the big fight that their uncle got into with their dad at Christmas dinner. Like, everybody, other people have abusive families or not, families are complicated. And most people's families have some kind of issues that are going to come up over the holidays, and nobody's posting about those things on social media. So when you're looking around, you're thinking, I'm the only one whose family is messed up. You definitely are not. And try to remember that in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really hard because we're just inundated with this stuff now. Mm-hmm. And while social media is a great way to connect, there is a side to it that is not good for us. And I think being sensitive to that, knowing as best you can, listening to yourself about when to turn it off. I mean, that's I think all of us, survivor or not, struggle with that. At this, all the time. So it's okay to turn it off. It's okay not to watch the sappy Hallmark movies. I personally don't. It's okay. It's okay if you've gone to a religious service for your entire life, it's okay to say, no, this year I don't want to do that because I don't feel that's, that's in my best interest. There's all kinds of things that are out there in different venues that can, it's okay just to say no.
And I think that's a good point to wrap up on, is that for survivors and for their partners, you get to take control of this season. Just like any other time of the year, you get to say what's right, what happens and what does not, who gets to be around you and who does not, how much interaction you have with anybody in your life, how much interaction your kids have with anybody in your life, especially that one. And this is a great time to practice setting boundaries and valuing your mental health over whatever anybody else might be thinking or saying about you.
I agree. And I agree, that applies to partners as well, because we can be very stressed at this time of year too. And so looking at your own mental health, looking at the mental health of the family unit, that takes priority. And yes, kids get disappointed, but I try to look at the long term here. A month from now, it's not going to matter. 5 years from now, they're going to remember if mom or dad was well or not. And so I definitely take a long-term view here.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Heather, for being here in conversation with me today.
That was great. Thank you so much.
If you want to learn more about Heather, check out her website at heathertuba.com. She's got some great resources and blog posts on there for partners of survivors. And if you want to find out more about me, you can find me at joyellebrandt.com. And you can find some blog posts and previous videos on that website, and also at parentingwithptsd.com. I want to wish everybody a happy holidays. And also I want to wish for you all the feelings over the holidays, and just allowing space for all of the feelings over the holidays, because we have this great vision of this time being happy, but in truth, it's a very intense time that can bring up all the feelings. So my wish for you is that you make space for all of those feelings as they arise and allow them to just be what they are. Thanks very much, everybody, for being here. And my name is Joyelle. This is Heather. And be kind to one another and be kind to yourselves.